Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan, and welcome to the latest episode of our entertainment show. As you've probably been hearing for the past month or so, we've been previewing and airing live about our upcoming new documentary. We're very much excited about this documentary. We've done two previous documentaries in terms of the gaming fight series. We've looked at Street Fighter, the Capcom production of the early 80s that was in arcades, game centers all across Las Vegas, all across the world. We've looked at the Mortal Kombat sort of franchise that came out in the 90s with NetherRealm Studios behind it, a big, massive production. And now we're going into the third big one in terms of gaming that people relate to. And this was the Japanese sort of version crashing into the market here, the Namco, in terms of the one and only Tekken, which came on to massive appeal in terms of PlayStations, Xboxes early on in the 90s, the late 90s, 96, 97, 98, 99. Tekken came with a bang and came out and sort of really took over the market and sort of really rivaled Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter for its dominance. And that led to many sort of magazines, cartoon magazines being produced in relation to Tekken. It led to animated series. It led to the blockbuster game in 2000, blockbuster movie in 2011, and in the follow-on movie in 2014. But one of my guests this evening to speak about her own memories in Tekken, and she's forever indebted in the franchises there. She's voiced the one and only Jun Kazama. And Jun Kazama, as you're probably aware, if you follow Tekken, whether the games or the movies, she is probably the mother of the principal character, Jun Kazama, in terms of that. So she's probably forever backed in the sort of Tekken sort of franchise in terms of the Mishima sort of empire and her sort of role in that. So many times the voice that you would have heard on your computers, on your computer screen would have been that of Vivian Lu. Vivian, absolute pleasure to talk to us today. And would you consider, I mentioned saying this to Leslie, who has voiced the role so many times of the name actually. She's voiced the role of Jin's love interest, and she also voiced the role of Nina Williams as well so many times in Tekken. But I asked her this question: does she consider herself to be a Tekken girl? Does she ever see herself open to possibilities of being in other sort of fighting games? And she sort of came back to me with an interesting topic if answers that if the opportunity came about. She said she'd have to do some really hard thinking about it because she's so indebted for the opportunities that Tekken has given her throughout her life in terms of her career and the impact it has on her even to this day, that she'd almost feel sad that she felt that she was turning her back in some way on Tekken. Are you sort of similar in terms of that, or you just think, no, bring on the next project?
Well, first of all, thanks so much, James, for having me. It's a pleasure to come speak with you today. And I love how passionate you are about all of this. I mean, that's an interesting question. So for me, obviously, Tekken is such an iconic franchise, and it's an honor to be a part of it in the Tekken Bloodline iteration of it. And my character is such a, like you said, such an integral heart backbone of the main character and his journey, and she represents integrity and she's a pacifist, which as far as moving on to next projects, I wouldn't say that it's just like, how do I say this? I wouldn't say that I feel like I'm betraying the franchise by working on other things. I think each project kind of has its own moment and like a very special experience working on that project. So for me personally, I give the project as much attention and respect as I can when working on it, and I try to do that for many of the other projects that I work on.
And I know, speaking to Leslie, she made her debut in the sort of Tekken Empire in 2001 in terms of voicing Nina sort of role. When was your sort of origins in Tekken? When did sort of your adventure come about for you? Was it around that time, or was it even earlier?
So as an observing fan, of course, you know, Tekken has been around and has been iconic for a long time now. So I've you know, dipped my toes in and peered in through the door here and there. But as far as active participation, this is my first time being part of the Tekken franchise. And so I feel so honored to voice such an important character that that the audience that we actually really like, you know.
Yeah, that's amazing, Vivian. So you obviously have a different insight because I was speaking to Leslie when she was voicing the role of Nina, and obviously at that time there was no sort of the backstory hadn't really developed, and so what she was working off was sort of drawings, in terms of graphic designs, in terms of costumes, and getting a sort of sense and a vibe through those sort of cartoon images. But when you were obviously doing your research for the Jin character, you can probably look back on movies, you can probably look back on animated TV series, you can look back in terms of the body of work that has been done in the past. So do you feel that extra research makes you better prepared maybe than if you had
Oh,
started off
completely.
voicing
Completely.
a character back in the early 90s where all you're just looking is a cartoon drawing on the page?
Totally. I mean, I'm coming into this where we have fully developed characters with decades of history, and we also have the wonderful resource that is Google and the internet. So it's much easier to do research, and also, you know, I had a wonderful English voice director guiding me throughout the entire process, Phil Bach. Hi, Phil. And so he provided a great framework. It was very important for us to we knew while working on the project that she was kind of the heart of the story and kind of kicking off Jin's journey, essentially. And so it was important for us to make sure that her character was very grounded and based in reality for this, you know, just deep love that she has for her son. So yes, to answer your question, 100%. It's much easier for me coming in at this point in the franchise than in 2001.
Yeah, and I suppose Jin, in terms of the Jin and the relationship between mother and sort of son, in terms of acting that out, in terms of normally when people think of fight games, it's the one-liners, it's the sequences in terms of the moves, the sort of finisher sort of moves. So, in terms of doing that sort of the sort of variety work now that comes with a Tekken, because the story mode to sometimes the fans, it's just as important in terms of bashing buttons as before. All the back in the early 80s, the 90s, in arcades, you probably got your 10 seconds of your one liners, and then it was just how sore your fingers would get for the next hour or so in terms of trying to bash buttons. They hit so many different combinations, and hearing the sort of cries and shouts in terms of success if you hit those sort of moves. It's almost like a sort of a mini sort of plot the voice actors are in these days in terms of being involved in big computer games. That the plot is just and the storyline is just so many times more important than the actual moves themselves for the audience.
Yeah, so I mean, gaming has evolved, like you said, so much in the past, well, since gaming has been around, but especially I'd say in the last 10, 15 years or so. And, you know, with the project I worked on, Tekken Bloodline, it enhances the gaming experience, just like how the gaming experience enhances the show experience, because you have both in mind, and it gives more depth and more realness to these characters and these stories. So
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Vivian, I remember doing the research in terms of the previous Mortal Kombat documentary we did there. And one thing that we did, we were doing research, we went up and we sort of looked at the animated sequence on YouTube, and actually did an amazing thing. They cut out all the sort of fight scenes and they just played it as an animated sequence. And in terms of storyline, I kid you not, it went on for a good 3 hours and 45 minutes in terms of from start to finish in terms of sort of preparation. So it was like watching three movies in the one. I suppose that's the case now for gaming and Tekken Bloodline
They're
in terms of the
cinematics, truly.
yeah. In terms, if you take out that, in terms of that, it's almost like a working week now. It's not a case of going into a shooting boot and spending 2 or 3 hours and say, hey, presto, job done, move on to the next one. Once you're involved in these big games now, just it's almost like you're learning the acting scripts of a character that has been involved in so many different takes within the day, or within so many series, within that sort of animated sort of clip world that is put together now in terms of games.
Yes. And, with iconic franchises or just anything where you have a large fan base, a large, very passionate fan base that, we're all very grateful for, you want to make sure that you give each project the amount of time and effort that it deserves to, make a good product, yes, but also for the fans, because there are people, us included, who really care about these characters. They're not just, little pixels on the screen. They have their stories, and their journey is important. So of course that's reflected in the production, the making of these stories.
And I suppose, Vivian, when you're doing a voiceover role, and many times you're projecting your voice into their terms of studio, but many times the studio director might tell you, right, you're projecting scenes now and voicing scenes where you're going to be voicing scenes, let's say, maybe with an Eddie Goro, or voicing scenes with a Yoshimitsu. Do you almost feel like that you almost, there's a change within you in terms of how you body language and how you phrase things, that if you know in your head you're voicing lines to a different sort of person, if you're voicing lines to a sort of menacing character, or if you're voicing lines to a woman character like an Anna Williams, Nida Williams, they might be there in front of you, but in your head you almost feel like that you're visualizing there in front of you. Does that sort of help you? Do you go
It
through
does. It does. I talked to a friend. I personally don't do on-camera acting work, but I talked to a friend who does both for voice acting. And he said, each different field is very different and it has its own challenges. But he said something that he finds challenging about voice work, he brought up a good point, is you don't have the costumes. You don't have the other, a lot of the time, you can't get everyone's schedules to work, or you just don't have an ensemble cast in the booth at the same time. So you're not playing off of the energy of another actor. You're not responding to anyone. You don't have the costumes. You don't have the set dressing. It's all in your imagination, so whenever we perform these lines, yes, you're absolutely right. You envision, well, first of all, where am I? How am I feeling? Who am I talking to? What is the objective of what it is I'm trying to say? And what do I hope to receive after sending my words out into the world? So all of that intention is very important for a character like that, or just for any character, really.
Yeah. And I wonder, Vivian, in that sort of terms, when you're inside that booth, and let's pretend you're in that booth on your own, but you're not only speaking, you're a part of a storyline sequence, not a fighting sequence. But so you're not only saying lines to one character, you're probably saying lines to one character for 1 minute, another character that is sort of second thing. Does it almost feel like a sort of split sort of personality, where you might be lowering your voice and talking, looking in this direction, even though there's no one there, and sort of voicing out the lines, pretending that person there, and then turn around and then look in the opposite direction, and voice your lines in terms of the other side, to give that sort of sequence in terms of that? Because I imagine knowing when to switch it up and switch it down, if you're just standing completely straight, speaking to Mike, could be very difficult.
Totally. And it's always a delicate balancing act, because you're not mic'd here. Your mic is in front of you. So if you're moving around too much, the engineer is not going to be able to pick up your performance, and you're going to have technical issues. So I think the forever challenge is, and I'm a very physical, I move my hands a lot when I talk anyway, just in my daily life. So the constant challenge is to move without moving too much, so you don't upset your engineer, who has to constantly reposition and do adjustments on their end. But yes, physicality certainly plays a big role in the process as well.
And I suppose, Vivian, in terms of Tekken, and it's so synonymous to those sort of one-liners, and it really sort of emphasizes those in terms of fighting games. They're probably the character signatures of, like, the moves, the character one-liners are so important. Do you almost feel, when in terms of emphasizing those words, that you just almost high pitch them, going to another sort of gear to really drive home those sort of one-liners, because probably how integral they are to the character?
I wouldn't say that I so much modulate my pitch, but there is more depth and uh, uh, um, weight, I guess, is the best way I can describe it to those words. Conversations Jun had with her son Jin, after in the first episode, talking about how he shouldn't abuse his power. I might take more breaths and say everything more slowly, more with more intention, and truly envision myself as this mother speaking to my son. I'm not just, I think grounding it in a realistic situation always helps sell the line. And again, I have a great or had a great English voice director for Tekken that really helped me do that.
And in terms of voicing sort of projects and doing that sort of work, do you really get excited like a giddy sort of schoolgirl when they start to come out and you get to see in the sort of for the very first time? And it is almost like a popcorn sort of Maltesers milkshake that sort of you treat yourself to that day when you start to know it's sort of coming out in terms of that. And it almost feel like that those are the days that make it all worthwhile in terms of those hours in the boot when you get to see that sort of project. And it's almost like going to your own sort of movie premieres, your own sort of Hollywood sort of lined out where you feel, right, I'm going to get dolled up today. The game is coming out today and we're going to celebrate at home and sort of have a family moment.
I am always excited when new projects come out just because I think that technology and how all of this animation looks, whether it be, animation or video games, because they have the budget of movies, they are movies now, essentially just interactive movies, is always amazing. And I'm a little kind of split sometimes. I don't know. I'm not someone who I'm watching my own work like this all the time, or I guess like this, because I don't know. A few people I feel like love the sound of their own voice that much, but sometimes when I'm really invested in the story, the best moments are when I forget it's me and I'm just a member of the audience enjoying that experience. So to answer your question, yes, I do get excited. I get excited at the visuals, and so much work and love and effort goes into producing all of these games and shows, and it's very gratifying to see it all come together.
I suppose, Vivian, you're starting your journey now with Tekkens and Tekken Bloodlines. And I got to ask you, when you get involved in these franchises, it does come about the Comic Cons, the Game Coms throughout the year, the sort of global sort of things, all the fans come, the booths. Do you imagine the vision? Are you looking forward to doing that maybe 10, 15 years' time? Because it happens to every voiceover actor. Leslie is starting 2001. She's still doing them. She was actually out in Saudi Arabia there only 2 weeks ago, and a massive Saudi Arabian fans coming up and started coming up to the booth with her and posing and doing all the Nina Williams sort of things. Are you looking forward to where Tekken's going to bring you in the world in 10 years' time? Be sitting down in these booths, signing names to the Jin character, standing and posing with people from all over the different types of the world in terms of, and sort of say, wow, I never knew they had Tekken in Morocco or Tekken in Egypt, and how am I finding myself out here? Surely they've better things to be doing than maybe looking at the pyramids than being in a room with me in terms of going through Tekken sort of knowledge. But that's very much the case when you get involved in projects like this. So you start looking forward to that, or are you thinking that's in the future, we'll worry about now?
That's very flattering of you to say. I mean, it's always an honor and privilege when people, it brings me a lot of joy to know that the silly little voices that I do, not to undermine my work, but bring people joy and are impactful in their lives. So of course I would love to meet anybody who where Tekken's franchise or my work made an impact on them. I certainly have that for projects that I love as well. But yes, if you're somewhere, definitely go see the pyramids. Like, you can meet me later. I'm not as important.
And Vivian, lastly from me to you, in terms of Tekken and the Jun character, and obviously you voiced her, and if she was in an encyclopedia, a sort of dictionary as such, and two blank sentences were left underneath her. You've seen so many different projections of her. How would you like those sort of two sentences to read from your own unique perspective of what you've taken from her as a sort of character? How would you describe Jun Kazama?
Something that I loved about playing her was she embodies so much of just such a loving, devoted mother. I think they're very, I wouldn't say few, but it struck me as such a heart wrenching story about true unconditional love. And it's beautiful to see that being expressed and done so well on the screen. So I think of her as a strong woman, a woman who is tough, clearly a badass, right? But also in touch with maybe some of the more stereotypically traditional feminine sides of her personality and what it means to be a nurturing mother, and being equally confident and proud of that as well. And I think that her memory and her principles inspire Jin too in his journey. And like you said, she's a very important part of that journey and his relationship with his skills. And so it was truly just a pleasure to play her.
On that note, Vivian Lu, thanks for sharing your memories with us today about your time on Tekken, about your experiences playing Jun Kazama, and you're starting your journey, and no doubt it's a journey that's going to be delving 10 years, 15 years into time, because one thing we know about these epic gaming franchises was, since they've been there from the 80s, they never go away. They always come back. They might disappear for a year or two, but they never go away. They always come back year after year. Movies come out, TV series come out, games will always come out in terms of those. So Tekken is here to stay, and hopefully, as very much Vivian, your role in this going forward is going to expand and get bigger and bigger and bigger as the years goes on. But for the moment, Vivian Lu, thanks for taking the time to speak to us today.
Thank you so much, James. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you. Take care, Vivian.
Thank you. You